welcome to another Monkey Business Show. Today I have Mike and Peter as my two specialists and analysts because we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in esports right now, Dota versus Worlds versus other titles. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I actually finished up a podcast of my own right before this, so I got a
Uh-huh.
back to back here. So really excited to be on this podcast with UJ and maybe not the Dota players for once, so we can talk about esports at a higher level. No offense to
Absolutely.
them. I'm not trying to like bag on. I'm just saying like different conversation. Right? We always talk about like Dota
This is
players and the
the
drama
late
and
night
stuff.
adult conversations. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm doing well. Thanks, Jay. I appreciate you asking how I'm doing. It's 10 o'clock here. I'm sipping my green tea.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the effort. So, look, for the audience that is watching today, we're going to have a little bit more of a high level conversation about what we think is happening in esports. And we're going to, maybe it's a little bit less chatty or family friendly, that other podcast. But I think it's an important conversation. And I brought it to, in my opinion, two of the smartest people out there. And Peter has seen a lot of the things inside Dota, but also outside Dota in his new position and the last few years. So I think bouncing this information with him will be actually really cool, for you guys to watch. So, yep, if you guys want to go right into it. The first thing I want to talk about is how the changes in Dota has affected Dota right now. And obviously the first one was the Battle Pass. The Battle Pass right now, it's in numbers that are very worrisome. We are right now, around 14, under 14 million, which really makes it the smaller TI price pool since 2017 or something like that. Math, where are we at with it?
Yeah, I think it was on pace with the 2016 one right now. So.
Mm-hmm.
It's not behind what people have grown to expect, right? Like generally
Mm-hmm.
every year it's been growing and growing and growing. People see that as a sign as like the game is growing, we're making positive progress. But this has been like that first time where people are like, yeah, it's probably not going to be the same amount of prize money. Bit of a reality check. Maybe just, I mean, do you feel like it's only because of the way like Valve designed it, or do you feel like it's more of an overall like people are spending less because I don't know, the economy is like in a challenging time? Like, what do you guys feel like is the main thing here?
Well, Mike and I speak a lot about this, and I'm going to set you up, Mike, so you can have more or less the answer. We have feel a correction right now. There's a big correction happening right now, and it's because during COVID, we got used to numbers and situations that are not really sustainable anymore. Mike, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So basically, the way we look at it, right, is during COVID, people have all the loans are on pause, things are in forbearance. So there's a higher amount of disposable income, but there's also a higher amount of time that people can actually they're not going to the office, they can spend consuming all this content. So I think you start seeing a lot of these numbers in viewership, a lot of the numbers from people buying things that keep them happy during the pandemic. A lot of this got inflated. So I think there's some of that gets corrected. But I think what we're seeing this year is the combination of that returning to normal. I think a lot of games are starting to plateau back to um, not necessarily pre-COVID viewership levels, but the viewership is dropping from those highs. So if you were expecting it to just kind of go to the moon consistently, that's not the case. That's to redistribute out amongst the games that people want to be dedicated to. But at the same time, then we kind of talk about the other side of it, where the fundamental structure and quality of the battle pass also changes. So you take the natural kind of redistribution of viewership and redistribution of what people want to spend their time and money on, and then also give it a lower quality. People are going to put something into what they feel like they're going to get the best value for, and I don't think that's going to be the battle pass. So obviously the price will then suffers astronomically. I think it's actually worse than we expected. I would say there should have been a dip 100%, but to return 6 years into the past on prize pool levels, I think that's a pretty shocking figure for a lot of us.
And what I will add is that obviously what he's saying, Mike, is people have more money during the pandemic and people have more time to watch things. Therefore, their attention was drifting to those other possibilities. But also, some of the biggest, main, let's say, entertainment things that can entertain you were not available. Movies were not really a thing. Then La Liga or like some of these big competitions were not available. So people's attention went somewhere else. Now that they are back, their attention goes back to where it was. And Mike also talks about the product. The product maybe is not what people were excited about. And I think that this is a very key point as well, because the product is very, very underwhelming. But Valve was trying to do something different. They had a battle pass that is shorter. They have a battle pass that maybe thematically is not as well wrapped as the other battle passes. But one of the key things is that they divided the battle pass into two parts. The part before TI, the money will go to TI, and the part after TI, that I don't know where the money goes. And it's made a lot of, let's say, that the coming soons and the exciting things where people don't know in a way where the money is going to funnel anymore. And I don't know if you guys, do you play a lot of Dota now, Peter? Have you seen the battle pass more or less?
I don't play. Yeah, I haven't played Dota in a while, so I'm kind of familiar with the like, as you mentioned, like they kind of put like half and half on it, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know like the ins and outs of how the battle pass is working.
So to make it very, very broad, like remember before there was not a lot of skins that had effects. There were not a lot. There were not a lot of bundles or a lot of things that have effects or lighting effects or like anything that will change this. But now we have, after many years, we have so many of them. So now having an effect is not really a big deal because I'm replacing effects on heroes.
Yeah.
And we have like the big theme, which was the crimson for TI, just the red. And remember, it used to be like super cool. Shit, you had the crimson from the Spectre, you were the big boss. But everybody has new fucking lighting things and yellows and blues and sparkles and
Yeah,
and
they're not as
arcana.
special
So it's
anymore,
like
right?
correct. What is the line of if everybody is special, no one is special? Like every hero right now has so many things that I
I-
I don't see the reason to buy it anymore.
I think like for the cosmetics, I was never a big cosmetics buyer myself, but I think for people who maybe only play like a couple heroes, like if you played the game very casually, you might only play like 5 heroes, maybe less, right? And so whenever there'd be like a new skin for your hero, you would buy it and it would give you like another kind of like maybe reinvigorate your interest in playing Dota.
Yeah, Valve have it's oversaturation again of content, of skins, of many things, and I think Valve has tried to do something because the stickers have not generated interest, and there's nothing to do with the sticker. You cannot put it on the middle of a weapon or something. So by having not utility, then what are you buying the sticker for? So you can put it in an album that comes out at the end of the game. Sorry, not enough. There is a product problem here.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
And it
Yeah.
also creates a more complicated thing because we are all playing TI because of the massive prize pool. I mean, we have to play TI, but there's so much of the money in one center event that the whole year is qualifiers of qualifiers of qualifiers to TI. So if that prize pool is not massive and you don't spread any money to the other events, and then your battle pass as a team is not making you money, it's like compounding. You're like putting shit on top of each other, and it's just more concentrated shit at this point.
Yeah. Well, I think the TI prize pool was like, I mean, let's be honest, it was so high, man. Like
Yeah,
$40 million for a Dota 2 tournament. Like, that's an insane number. And here's the thing is like now these players, instead of winning 4 million each, they're going to win 2 million each. And I think that everybody is just going to keep going at it the same way if they were like into Dota before. But last place at TI is like $100,000 per person or something. That's a life changing amount of money for like just about anybody at such a young age. I don't know.
correct. So
It
I
just
don't
has so
think
far. It has so far to fall, is what I'm saying. Before I think it really gets
you think so.
unappetizing.
Okay, well, let me tell you how far you fall. Because if you are not making it to TI, how much money do you make as a player?
You make zero. Is devastating.
Zero.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have to be.
So that's my
That's
problem.
why esports is a young man's game, because you kind of have to be like living off your parents or somebody in order to kind of really put the time in to get it done. And everybody aspires to have this like path to pro, semi-pro experience, but it's just so difficult to actually execute. And Valve does not put in any time doing that, just about. So, they're just not, it's just not a winning formula over here for like long term.
Yeah. It creates this it basically makes a bimodal system where the only people who can actually afford to do it are people who have like low risk, essentially like young kids who are coming up. because they have their whole future, so they can afford to invest the time, or the people who are actually financially well off, your veteran players who've done this and have won and have those recognitions. But anybody who's caught in the middle, there's a real trade-off that they have to consider, right? Is maybe I'm on an org and I'm getting a few thousand a month salary or something like that. You're scraping by, and if you don't make it to TI, like, you got to scrape by again. And it's like, well, maybe you can go to school, you can do something else with your time. So it forces that entire middle out, and then everybody who's young faces the same consequence, right? It's like, do I really want to make that next step, or do I just want to transition into something else? And we were talking about that a little bit before. Was like, you look at like the league ecosystem, you look at other ecosystems that are franchised, and it's more distributed. Like, prize money isn't the determining factor. There's a little bit more stability across the ecosystem. And there's supposed to be a path to pro. I mean, we don't talk about like the whole path to pro failure across every other esport, um, but yeah, it's really pronounced in Dota, where it's like, here's the big show. If you don't qualify for the qualifier to the qualifier to make it there, you're done. And if you aren't lucky enough to be somebody who's got the resources or the time to commit back into it, that's it. You could waste an entire year of your life and have zero to show for it, or less. You could have been spending money to do all this stuff and time, and you're set back. But if it's $40 million, it's enticing. I'll play that game. But when it becomes, 15, then I'm gonna weigh my options a bit differently.
So we conducted a study, and we saw that people that played Dota were raised mostly in wealthy households, in households where both parents were working or one of the parents was able to bring a single income, but it was high income houses, because of what Mike said. In order for you to be able to play Dota continuously and seriously and exclusively, you either have to be very, very young, you have to be financially well off because your parents simply have money for you to play, or you have to be successful very early in your career, which allows you to play because you already made your money. That, in a way, like Mike said, eliminates the whole half.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
So
I
Peter,
think the regional leagues, like the prize money was just like I don't know, not like, it's almost like insulting. Like first place for the regional league is like 30 grand. Like what? Like that's
Split
like
5 ways at least.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I played in one of the seasons in NA DPC, if you remember, with like Fear and Moo and Snake King, and the prize pool is like pretty even down the ways, but it's like we're thinking like, man, even if we win this is like, what was it, like 5-6 grand a player for first?
Yep.
So it's just like, that's like not even rent in America for 3 months. Like I gotta
Yeah.
also have a job to support myself.
We have a system where if you are a team and a player and you do not make it to TI, your whole year is an absolute failure.
Yeah, for sure.
That's it. Failure. There is no other way to catalog it.
And it's been like that forever.
There's,
by the way, it's
yep.
been like that, since I played in like 2014. Same thing. Like you, even as a caster, it's funny. You like judge your success on the year. Like, did I get invited to TI or didn't I? Because caster, you go there and you get your your big payday for the year, sort of thing. And same thing as a player, right?
So Peter, are we getting spoiled? Is that my question for you? Because if you look at back 5 years and we're like, well, you're still, like you said, you still have a lot of room to fall. Well, things have not really been bad. Or maybe it's just my bias that is like, okay, this tastes like shit right now, but it's not really that bad.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense to me. Other games are going to be more favorable for esports depending on who's running the programs and who's funding the programs. So it's really nice when like a really involved game developer who is paying for everything is actually like putting their money where their mouth is and like actively participating.
It really starts becoming like the correction, like we were talking about, is happening so fast in esports. And my question to you, Mike, is this correction affecting the other esports as gruesomely as it's affecting Dota?
Yeah, I would say in different sectors, right? I think, the biggest, I mean, there's a couple pieces to play around with, right? Because there's a level of involvement by the publishers themselves that are trying to intervene. But, you could look at Overwatch League as one of them, right? That's pretty stark from where it started back in 2018 to where it is now, obviously, from a viewership and commercial perspective. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff with Activision that's been happening outside as well that's been impacting that and accelerating that process. North American League of Legends is another one. Viewership's been declining pretty consistently in the region. There's been I believe, what was it? The FlyQuest ownership just changed in North America as well. It's been falling off the back of, a few orgs that have been rumored to look to sell. We've been seeing that in EU as well. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is that there's just a lot of, you know, teams getting, squeezed out or not seeing the same, returns that they would have expected. I think when all this VC came in early 2016 is really when it started, 2016, 2017, but kind of picked up towards 2018. I think once that all, we're starting to hit the end of that 5-year expectation for a return. And a lot of people probably started seeing the writing on the wall pretty quickly with the money that was getting burned in all these esport titles. So yeah, I think people are starting to cut their losses. I mean, a lot of OpEx cuts coming across the board for a lot of things, and a lot of prioritization for where you're putting your capital. Even team side, right? Not to jump around too much, but like teams are making games, energy drinks, sandwiches, anything else but esports. They're still playing them because they have a fan base to connect to, but now it's just part of the funnel to drive them to an actual, a separate product essentially.
So let me put in maybe simpler words some of the things that you explain. Sorry. Okay, so when you get investment and a team gets investment, somebody's giving you money because they want to make money out of you. It's actually very simple. And they give you money with expectations that how many years it's going to take them to make money back, or how many years do they have for this thing that they're buying into to be worth a lot of money. So you have, in a way, real estate. This is my area. So after 5 years of promises and projections, a lot of people are seeing that their investment was not a good one. For example, Overwatch. In Overwatch, a lot of people were given an opportunity to buy a franchise slot in order to play on this game while nobody else could play. So it reduced the amount of teams that were playing just to the people that could afford it. And those people were, in my opinion, wealthy, smart companies and individuals behind those teams. And they thought, well, if this is like the NBA, which is a franchise league, or like League of Legends, this will work. Well, even though it would be arguable to say how much money they actually spent on the franchise, let's just say that each one of the teams paid $10 million. And now that is not really worth it a lot, which now investors start thinking, should I have done something different with my money? And now we've seen, in my opinion, the first real failure of esports. I mean, from what we know, teams are not going to have to pay all the money that they once were to say, but we don't think that the league has right now produced any profits. And the idea of these leagues are that you invest this money, but when the leagues make money, then the teams directly benefit from the profitability of the league. But they've never made the league profitable. So you've never really taken money out. You're just putting money in. Call of Duty was a great game. And when it was played by everybody, it was healthy and it was pretty fun and the tournaments were really cool. The moment they franchise it, the viewership is simply not there. Yes, for the big games, the viewership is always there for every game. But the question is it there for everyday's games? Is there enough interest on the league? Peter, from your perspective, what do you thought about when Overwatch launched? What do you thought 2 years into Overwatch? And what do you think about Overwatch right now?
Oh man. Well, I think you're kind of right. Like, I think people were sold kind of a fantasy that wasn't real. It did kind of create, I don't know, it created a lot of jobs in esports, definitely. But was it like a good investment? I think definitely not. And it is kind of funny that, it is 2022, right? Like these investments and stuff were starting to pick up in these esport teams in 2016, 2017. And I guess you're right. Like people are kind of coming around thinking like, are you guys raising again? Like how is my investment growing here? And in the reality, it just isn't growing, right? It's kind of just headed to closer to zero,
Yep. And I have a question for both of you. do you guys thought that the product of Overwatch League was good or was bad? Like, it didn't work because it was not a good game or not a good product,
So
or it's just because they created an artificial environment?
I think it's because they're creating the artificial environment. I feel like people are really adverse to actually just kind of growing their game in their community slowly. I think that's one of the great things about Dota and CS is that you kind of had this like 7 year saturation period back when people were playing like CS 1.6 and Dota 1, where this game grew this like massive, massive fan base that then created an actual demand to understand who was the best at it. And that spawned esports. A lot of people think that, because Dota and CS and these games have been around so long, they contribute that partially to esports as increasing the shelf life of their game. People have tried to emulate that with other games almost as a like, hey, we're going to launch our new game with an esports program, but you really need to create a great game that demands to understand who's the best because they find it interesting. And I just don't think that like Overwatch ever had that base community that was large enough to justify an investment of this level from such a large investment, right? Like, how many teams are there? Like you said, like 7 million each. Like that's an insane amount of money for like a day one esport program.
Yep.
Yeah.
But they thought that if we go directly, to the best version of the league, the fans will come, like build it and fans will come.
Yep, for sure. No, I think I see it a lot, and I've been, I see it even in like marketing, like game developers. They're so focused on like Twitter and Instagram, and now it's TikTok and all these things, but people aren't thinking about. I think Reddit and Discord is really where people are actually finding valuable information on the internet. Um, and that's kind of where like you create these like personal connections and really kind of share what you're passionate about, like from friend to friend, which I think is where actually people kind of like, hey, come try this new game, right? Come play a game of Dota with me. That happens on Discord, not anywhere else. So,
Hmm.
um, I think that people are just kind of trying to buy esports and they're not willing to kind of put in the work that it takes to build from zero.
I mean, I will play the counterpoint to you. Replicate OG is, let's say, impossible. You cannot replicate OG. So if you have a lot of money and you're, let's say, an owner of a basketball team, you have two choices to fight against OG. You either don't come into Dota at all and you just ignore this title, or you're gonna have to buy someone that is already has their legs and the roots, into the game. You have to buy OG, or you have to buy Secret, or you have to buy someone else. Okay. But if you are an investor, at one point you say, well, fuck it. Instead of buying someone, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create another artificial game so I don't even have to compete into Dota, I'm going to create my own alternative. And I think we've seen that none of those alternatives have actually worked. Like Peter was very wisely saying, if the game has fans and the game has a community that plays it, regardless of the franchise or not, the game will work. And if the game doesn't have a player base and a fan base, regardless of how pretty you put it, it just simply doesn't work. Mike said something interesting before. The League of Legends viewership is also correcting, and it has gone down. So this is not only a Dota thing that is happening to Dota or to Overwatch. Do you think that the League of Legends correction has to do with what we spoke about at the beginning of the pandemic, or has to do with the fact that now there's oversaturation of content? Or my hypothesis is that I think people are not anchored on the game like they thought they were going to be. There is less loyalty to the game that everybody expected. And there is just more things to do with your time. And some of them are more fun than watching maybe the same game again.
Mhm.
But give me a little bit more of your read, Mike, into this.
Yeah, I think there's a couple because League itself, is broken up by region. So each region is kind of suffering from its own, its own problems, I would say. Because as you've seen North American viewership kind of decline, LEC viewership, which is the European League, has actually gone up pretty much. I think this year actually it's plateaued a bit, but it's still been much stronger than its North American counterpart. And if you look at the level of investment relative in both of those regions, North America has, I would say 2 to 3 times the level of investment as Europe. So you see all this attempt to grab the North American consumer, right? You want to push all of your marketing towards, but I feel like a lot of the teams in North America don't really have that marketing pull. Branding for North American League of Legends is almost unrecognizable. There's nothing really interesting about any of the teams in particular. Like I've been a fan of League since season 2. I've been playing League since season 2, and I've been following LCS since it started. Cloud9, is something I'd follow. They had a great story when they came into the league. TSM, Team Liquid, and then maybe 100 Thieves, right? Those are the big brands. But even still, recently TSM's kind of fallen off. From like everyone's had their own controversies, right? Which is separate, but it all kind of feels the same. Like the social media accounts feel the same. The branding, the players, everything else feels just homogenous. And maybe that's just me because I've been around it for so long that it doesn't really strike a chord. But when I look at Europe, you see a lot of, which is what I think helped them, is the growth of the regions, the different countries. Like Spain and France have grown into esports powerhouses, for League of Legends, right? You could look at Koi and K Corp, right? Creator-driven brands that have really pulled a following and driven that into the league, right? And you're seeing that also with, the expansion into Valorant as well, with both of those teams, being able to compete there and pull those fan bases. So I think that there's at least more from a regional perspective, because you don't have that. There's no like East Coast West Coast rivalry in League of Legends for North America, right? But there could be if you put Koi and K Corp in a show match, like you're going to get a full stadium, right? Or if you put Vitality and K Corp in a show match, which we did for Valorant, I believe, you're going to get a full stadium, which they did, right? I think it was like 12,500 people coming to an event. And in terms of the Asian side, like the LPL, LCK, I haven't really followed too much into that, but their viewership has always been pretty consistent. It's hard to get an accurate gauge on that, but they've expanded the league. I think it's 18 teams in China, right? So something's got to be going well. I mean, obviously the huge just population, but if you can expand a franchise league to 18 teams as one of the regions, that's obviously pretty strong. And there's a lot of people who are willing to watch and spend money there. So I think each region is really facing their own challenges, but I think North America is probably the most dire out of the major regions, at least. And I don't really see too many avenues for it to improve, because they're not even doing that well in competition, right? We're all memeing. I think North America got its first win at Worlds in the group stage today. I think they're 1-9 right now.
Okay, so
Or
let's break
one,
down.
yeah.
With Peter and I will try to break down some of the things that you mentioned.
Go
So
for
number
it.
one, in America, it's true that when you have all the teams playing in Los Angeles, all these organizations don't really have a lot of, the keyword is geolocation. Let's say a domestic home market. But America has really cool domestic home markets in college football, college basketball, and obviously the NBA and the NFL. But teams were not really, let's say, geolocated. And now everybody's geolocated in LA. Peter, you've seen a little bit more about this because you've lived already in different cities around the world, in America. When you were living in Texas, when you're living in LA,
Yep.
how do you see this failure of creating a domestic market?
Yeah, I just feel like it was never really real. And I feel like it goes back to exactly what I was talking about before. Like you have to really actually reach out to people and create like local opportunities to create a real community. And you have to build that from scratch. And I just think that people were trying to build this just like they just thought they were like famous sports teams showing up to these towns. And it was just not real. Um, so I think that we're dealing with like a very digitally native audience, especially here in America, where I don't think we have like a great, um, I don't know, we're not like super prideful in where we're from, I think is my interpretation. So creating, how can you make people feel a part of a thing that's on the internet exclusively? That's
Yeah.
the challenge. And yeah, are you guys paying attention to Nouns Esports at all? You guys checking that out?
We do. I do a little bit. Yeah, mostly from you actually, following
Yeah.
your breakdown.
Okay. Well, that's a very like everybody gets involved, built an esports team together kind of thing project. So I think it's a really interesting way to create a very passionate fan base that would be willing to spend more money on esports than our current audiences on esport teams, right?
Let's explain a little bit more some of the things that we were saying. Let's just develop a little bit more. So one
Yeah.
of the things that Peter was saying is that why would you follow a team just because it's in a region? What is your connection to the region specifically? And we've seen in America that the closest or strongest connections is universities. Where do you went to university with, like to, and then you follow that team. So now what Peter is saying is that now we live in a digital world where that connection is not really that strong. So Nouns, in a way, is a digital community that has designed, let's say, specific purposes of what they want to do with the money that they allocate together. And some of those things are not maybe geolocated, but they are in a way, like, what is it called? Like the centers of passion, you know? Do you have
Yeah.
enough passionate people on one point that get together to do one thing? And then if so, how do you conduct that passion into actions and the money that you put behind? Is that more or less accurate, Peter?
That's an awesome explanation. I think you say it better than I do. So
Announce is a digital crypto community that fundraise to do this. Is that correct? And they have specific
yeah,
initiatives that they want to do.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
They kind of elected like a esports group, which I'm a part of. We call it the Esports Pod to basically spend like $600,000 on initiatives over the next however long, and yeah, we're just like signing esport teams and trying to build our community and show people that like if I think building a company is a pretty intimidating thing, right? It's also super risky, especially like if you wanted to go build an esports team in today's market, right? Especially after all the doomsday we've been talking here, like nobody's going to want to do that. You're not going to be able to find investment, sort of thing. So this is just a different model of investment, I guess, and then people can. It's kind of like something you do in your free time. You don't have to commit your life to it. Less risk,
Okay.
I think, is the idea. You can come and go and not have to like sign your life away to investor.
Okay. I want to bring the conversation back to Europe. So
Yeah,
in Europe,
I was gonna add here just for the Europe
yeah, go
thing,
ahead.
because I recently was in London for the Pokemon event, and I went to my first Premier League game. I saw West Ham play against Brighton, and it was kind of an enlightening experience for me. I never really felt like that environment, but sitting in that stadium with like 99% dudes who are just like swearing like Twitch chat at the players constantly, it kind of just felt like Europe has just such a better like stadium culture and like team rivalries. And I get that like American football is like huge here and baseball did well for a while as well, but I don't know. Soccer feels way different over there, and I get why people are into it. And I
So
feel like that's maybe
elaborate.
esports is kind of like this, like you talk about Spain and France kind of building their
Exactly. Yeah.
regional areas, and they have like it's such a great rivalry as well. Natural storylines, like we don't really have that in like Overwatch League, for example, here
Yeah.
in America.
So to explain it again to people, so obviously Europe is a, let's say, not such a huge continent, but it's fragmented into many, many, many different countries with long stories and rivalries between them. And even inside their own countries, there is massive regional, let's say, cultural differences that make rivalries really big. Obviously, I'm generalizing and reducing this a lot, but Madrid and Barcelona inside of Spain are culturally very different and they actually speak a different language. And those rivalries that are socio-political are in a way represented in Real Madrid versus Barcelona being the two biggest teams. So you have a massive internal rivalry inside of Spain. But you also want to beat the Frenchies every single time you have a chance because there is a massive rivalry between Spain and France. And France wants to beat the British at any time they have any sport or anything. So now you see some of the esports teams that are trying to establish their fan bases locally. So you have Heretics that is one of the Spanish teams. Then you have Koi, which is French team. Then you have Vitality. And I think that the next step, actually, I don't think, I know that Riot is trying to capitalize on this because of how they chose the teams for the Valorant slots. They chose a specific Spanish teams with regionality, French teams, two Turkish teams, and then the CIS team, which is Navi, and then the few Europeans, let's say global teams in the middle. And they want to activate that local fan base, which is one of the things that work good in League of Legends. But now they have a bunch of teams in the middle that are useless.
But those teams are there because they chose to be there, right? They didn't just like go there because they were like, hey, you could have a franchise slot in the city if you build there, right? They were like already there.
Correct.
Correct.
It started regionally and then they went up.
Valorant's interesting because it has a lot of, I think it pulls a lot of the stronger regions together, right? Like things that came out, I think, from Valorant specifically, you have Japan as a power market coming up as well. Which, really in esports, you don't really see too much about Japan. A lot of the culture has been pretty conservative, and the only thing that people would really relate to it was like Nintendo fighting games, essentially. They have League of Legends, but the only time they get to Worlds is
Pokemon Unite. They're the
Pokemon Unite.
They were the most popular region for the game. Its esports program.
Interestingly, and I'll thank Julian for this because he's my Japanese analyst here. But essentially, I think it was April of either last year or 2020, I can't remember specifically, but they passed a law to try to encourage the growth of esports, which is a monumental step. And I think you're starting to see a lot of things. There's something around like how the prize pools are connotated with gambling, which is why they can't do it. But now we're seeing that evolution. Also in Turkey has been growing. It's was one of the most watched. I think, two teams in the league now are Turkish teams. So a lot of growth in that region. If we're looking towards APAC, I mean, they basically picked, Global Esports as the Indian powerhouse. You have Talon, Secret. I mean, each of them are picking almost a specific country in APAC. Then you have a couple of Japanese, Korean teams as well. So you're really hitting all the local markets. And then North America, when they did the Americas League, 5 North American teams, and then essentially 5 LATAM Brazilian teams as well. So, you're basically covering every major market, and getting the biggest names and brands, but ones that are, different enough that you can hopefully draw, a bunch of, all those different individual fan bases from the teams, but also like cover enough of the region to just, be the catch-all net to drive as much viewership as possible for the game. So.
Okay, but now is my challenge to you guys. Because in my opinion, they have tested a few different hypotheses. Number one was, let's bring the traditional sport owners that will drive a fan base, which had never happened. I don't think anybody follows the Milwaukee Bucks and therefore follows FlyQuest. Never happened. Then they kind of said, we'll do super brands. And in my opinion, that's the only one that has worked so far. If you have super brands, people more or less come. But then what Mike was saying, which is true, is that a lot of the super brands look and feel exactly the same. I've given you this compliment, Peter, a million times. And it was you and Alex and people that were in EG. EG had a very cool and unique and distinctive vibe to the team. It was the bad boys. And you could love them or hate them, but you knew who they were, you knew how they were, and you knew what the team was all about. In the first iteration, they were buying everybody's player, poaching everybody, and it's like, no, we're EG and fuck it. And then when Peter and the boys took the team with Sad Boys, you guys had an edge. It was irreverent. It was cool. It was like Tony Stark. But everybody's right now so sanitized. Everybody's just saying like the PR thing that it's just all of them feel exactly the same.
Yeah, it's bad, man. It's really bad. I think esports is really boring. At least like the way like all these esport teams are interacting, and I mean, I'll always be a league hater, but I just can't get into the LCS, man. Yeah. I don't know.
It's too PG. They're trying to make like Nickelodeon. There's no personalities. Nothing comes out, and it's just I don't
It's
know.
just
It's just
too it's just too corporate, I think.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's my
I mean,
perspective. You need some rowdy
yeah, when you
fans,
look at
like
the
some.
investment, yeah. I mean, Jay, I think we talked about this. I don't know if it was 2 weeks ago, but it was basically like this. There's just like when you scale, there's a level of sanitization that you go through for all these companies, right? Because you know, if you've ever watched the show Shark Tank, essentially, it's like you have a really cool niche product, and somebody's like, "Wow, that's going to hit the market. It's going to be great." But then if you want to put it on the shelves in Target and Walmart and all your major retailers, well, you got to get rid of the curse words. You got to get rid of any of the controversies. It's got to be like, you know, cut down so that it hits the widest possible net. And but that's the goal of companies, right? It's like you need to make as much money possible. You need to scale as much as you can. Like that's how this works. And I think maybe the problem with esports, I mean, I do think part of the problem is like when you look at it, not everybody needs to do that. And I think once you go that route and you start pushing for, a globalized audience, you're an international team, you can start seeing that between like Fnatic, Team Liquid, G2, C9, TSM. They're all kind of the same thing. There's, and I mean, even if with major brands, you see it on their Twitters now, right? Like the Duolingo thing on Nickelodeon, just, with the Katy Perry award, that thing, it's like all corporate Twitter accounts have to do the same thing now. Esports does it. So does KFC, Wendy's, whatever. They all do the same thing. Um, so as you're pushing this up, though, it does give you an opportunity because now they're leaving this niche. They're becoming this same level of sanitization. Now you have the niche for newer brands to come up and kind of attack that, and then the cycle continues. They get investment, they grow up, they become scaled, and then the ones up here, if they're not good products anymore, they die off, and then the cycle of capitalism keeps on going, right? So
So I need to explain one thing: the sanitization, because I don't know how many people are actually going to get this word. So it means that you have to be, let's say, always appropriate to everybody. So the moment that I operate just in Spain, I only have to be appropriate to the social constraints of this country. But the moment that I operate in 10, 15, 20 countries, every country has their own things that they're sensitive about and that you cannot joke about, and they're not going to get your joke, and the language doesn't translate, which means you can't make any jokes, you cannot take any positions, you cannot say anything besides happy birthday, you cannot even say Merry Christmas because not everybody has Christmas. So you have to say happy holidays. So everybody's message starts changing completely to become this corporate thing. Because if you don't, and you make a mistake and you're going to make it, you're going to get hammered in the head. One thing that I would like to say is I've mentioned this and I had a conversation with Johan about this, and I want people to understand this concept. Let's say that Dota was a small game that was founded and like people of the community were paying money directly to found the international and all that. And there are players that devoted their whole life to grow this game. And I believe that they were vital to making the game what it is right now. But tomorrow, the game is sold from Valve to Activision for $6 billion, and these players are not going to get a check from Valve. So you have, in a way, spent your life making this game what it is without owning anything.
Yeah, so that's why I was trying to get that. I was trying to get that Dota 2 org started back in the day with all the players, trying to like, hey, like let's start running our own tournaments and build our own company, and we can, do the marketing that Valve doesn't seem to care to do, and fun to like just kind of create like a marketing branch known as esports for Valve essentially. But like, man, it's just so hard to mobilize
Yeah.
a community like that, and that's where these other games have such an advantage, where their developers are willing to sort of go the extra mile and create a really, kind of, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not an incredibly risky sort of life
Yeah.
decision, right? It's like there's gradual growth here. I think people look at League versus Dota and they think, where's it going to be in 5 years, right? Especially after this year with the TI prize pool dumping. People are going to choose League like 99 times out of 100.
So we need to understand that at the end of the day, developers supported esports as a way to market their games. Esports is a marketing department inside of a game developer. And they believe that if they create a cool esport proposition, people will come. And then esports is one of the biggest retention tools, meaning that if you like the esports, you will stay longer in this title instead of bouncing out to the next shiny new title that comes out. Okay. So esports make people come to the game and they stay longer in the game, which is what you want as a developer. You want people to stay in your game longer. And we can see how games like Dota and CSGO, in my opinion, will not even survive the first few years without the esports proposition, because that's why we're all still playing the game. First, the game is amazing. Both of those games are amazing. But then we all develop this relationship with the competitive, which is exactly what Peter said, that you actually want to see who the best player is. You want to see it. There's so many people playing that you naturally want to see who the best is. And it creates this alternative. I believe that developers don't think that the esport is the way to bring new players into the game. I think they have now changed into sponsoring streamers, content creators, and people, and they've seen that they drive much faster people into the game, but for a short period of time. It's a much higher burst, but then there is no retention. But in my opinion, in a moment where all these companies that fundraise need to produce results, it creates the fastest artificial results possible. Okay?
Yeah.
Let's just break that down for a second. You need results, because if you don't get results right now, you're screwed. And you produce an artificial result that doesn't carry through time, but it allows you to fundraise and to say, we're okay. We're doing okay. We're doing okay, right? Look, we're okay. We're okay. But there is no longevity, meaning no, it will not survive a lot of time because it's not built on anything real, once again. Have you guys seen this shift?
I definitely get what you're saying. Have I seen it? I don't know. I think there's a lot of, I mean, that's kind of the modern day marketing. And you're just saying that people are less willing to invest in esports. I still feel like these big esport events do create a lot of, people reinstalling the game or maybe people downloading the game for the first time. I don't know if Dota, like the international, is doing that at this point. It might be like too old of in a game, but these like newer games that launch at these big esport programs, I think that's part of their goal. They see like, they have so many beats throughout the year that drive, like a spike in game activity. And some of them are like a new hero or, a new champion or whatever. But another one might be, Worlds or the international, where it's, they kind of get like all this new attention. So I think it's a matter of cost of like, as you mentioned, like, can I get the same bang for my buck without all of the legwork of running, a year-long esports program with like multiple live events, or can we just like pay some influencers and have them stream our game when our new cosmetics come out? Leads to some
Yeah.
poor game development. I think a lot of bad games.
And Mike, what do you think about this?
So I think there's, I mean, for the esports side, I think there's an interesting point because like I think there's more efficient routes for like the publisher to monetize against. But at the end of the day, you will need to get a community involved and active. And I think, esports is that niche yet loud community that actually pushes a lot of that, that drive, because without that, like they're the most vocal critics. Like they're not going to be forcing the developers to improve their game as much. Your pro players and those who are really dedicated to high rank are going to be the ones who are saying like, hey, these need to get tweaked. And, that's a separate part of the feedback and community that I think people leave out of this equation. In terms of the marketing, right? Like I can see publishers moving towards a way where, they're just partnering directly with the, the brands, right? Like if you look at Worlds, like I think Louis Vuitton does the case for Worlds. The trophy is done by Tiffany's this year. Could be wrong. They have MasterCard, I think, just signed an extension on their partnership, I think for another 5 years, to do with like Worlds as the event itself. And it's like they're drawing all this in, and it's like, okay, but those aren't being redistributed down into the other leagues. It's just like for the publisher, right? So, obviously they're going to run it, whatever cost they can to keep putting on the event, because they're pulling all those revenue streams in, but like what parts are the teams getting? Are they getting, part of the streaming rights deals, right? That's a big part of a lot of traditional sports is, you know, if you look at the NFL deal, right? Like each team is getting billions of dollars. I want to say it's billions. I could be wrong. Of dollars in the,
Lots of
you know,
money.
a lot of money. Yeah, there's a lot of zeros that they're getting. But like, where our esports teams getting that? Our esports team's big enough that they're the esport big enough that they can get that and they command a deal, right? There's no cable television; it's all on Twitch, and Twitch isn't paying, the teams necessarily to run things anymore. You've probably seen a huge drop off on individual teams that get sponsored by Twitch. I don't think they do any team sponsors actually anymore.
None of them anymore.
So yeah, a lot of the traditional models for people getting that revenue in normal sports don't exist. So, there's got to be a way to activate. So I think right now people are like, who can take the bullet for building the community for us? Because the publisher doesn't want to build the community necessarily. They just want to reap the benefits of it. So there's kind of this, that's the incentive is like, can you be a community driver for this? If you can, cool, you can play with the big boys in the franchise league and we'll lock off the communities. And
That's
obviously you'll
literally
have,
Valorant, League of Legends, right there. If you
yeah,
can bring value to us, we will lock the ecosystem for you, so you get to be part of it. Which is exactly what Riot has done now. Because before they used to have the barrier of entry of you pay the fee to even be able to play with the big boys. Now Valorant is saying no, you don't have to pay anything. We're gonna give you the slot through a process where we select the teams. So now think about it, it's genius, dude. It's fucking genius. Riot is there sitting down thinking, what is the combination of teams that we believe that makes us more valuable? That's it. Not what the fans want to see, not what the community, not what the teams, not the brands is. How do we create the ecosystem that we want by cherry picking? So I want to plug a few other holes that we did not cover. We're going back to Dota for a second. There was a big controversy about the casters and their stickers. I don't know if you follow a lot of these, Peter. But what they did is that they bundle the casters together, and you have to click and roll, and then you can get one voice. But it was very hard to get the voice that you wanted. And there was a big community outrage about it. But teams are still bundled with each other. And it's not that easy to get the player that you want or the team that you want either. But they haven't unbundled the teams. And I get it. I want everybody to make money. I want casters to make money. I want buff to make money. I want teams to make money. I want hopefully users to make money. Okay, I want everybody to make it. But the whole thing that they constantly say is, yes, teams, but you have TI price pool. It's the constant thing. Well, we have to do this for the casters because the casters don't have TI price pool. But at what point the price pool is too small on TI, where all this house of cards just falls? Because at one point, the qualifiers of the qualifiers of the qualifiers and not making any money as a player is granted, or because think about it, the 15th or 18th or 20th team in TI right now is not going to make more than 30K because the price pool has dropped so much. So like you said, Peter, before the last team at TI would make 100K. Well, no, they don't. So at what point just the ecosystem is just not holding? You can go to TI, sacrifice the whole year, and still not make enough money to live.
Yeah, I think it's really, it's. I think the question is how much investment is Valve going to continue to put into Dota as it kind of starts to show signs of shrinking or weakening at the very least, and that could really decide like how fast it kind of goes away for a lot of people.
Great point.
Really,
now I'm going to
really
take
unfortunate stuff for Dota right now.
So I'm going to take us to a completely different place. I'm trying plugging holes. Literally, I was making notes. We talk about League of Legends and about the different regions. And I'm going to give you a quote from someone from Riot that they gave me. They said, at the end of the day, League of Legends is a flying turtle. We're all in this flying turtle, and in the bottom is China. So really, the whole thing that we're doing in Europe, in North America, and the other regions is feeding the Chinese ecosystem and the globality of the game. But they are kind of willing to take operating losses everywhere else just because in China is so stupidly profitable, this game, with the whatever they have there. Because they have 33 servers in China of League of Legends. This is insane.
Crazy. That's crazy.
So we constantly talk about LEC, LCS, and all that. And I constantly think about this quote because the truth is, does it really matter to Riot if LCS viewership is down? No, because Chinese teams like dunking on North American teams in Worlds. You need to have a person dunking and a person that is being dunked on, you know?
Yeah, but I mean,
So,
esports can be for everyone. Not everyone lives in China. Right? You got to have something going else on elsewhere.
correct. But I can see from the level of either investment, dedication, or simply results that either they do not know how to create results in this region, or maybe it's not simply an objective. It's simply not an objective. What we have to say then is that, yes, we want the globality of the game because Chinese teams playing Chinese teams will not really work. So they want the globality of the team. And in a way, my opinion is that Riot makes money here and in a way pulls it out and gets to subsidize the rest of the ecosystem. I believe that is actually happening in Europe in Dota. I think there is a specific regions in Dota that are in a way really driving value to invest everywhere else. But we have to do it that way because otherwise we don't have anybody to play against. So it's a necessary thing. But you're in a way now, OG as a team has to be subsidizing the teams that are going to play against me in TI for this incredible amount of money, which is really not in my advantage. But if I don't do that, then I have no one to play against. And there will never be $40 million to play there because the community will not see it. You see, it's a complicated paradigm, you know? If I don't do anything for the other teams, I have no one to play against. But if I do too much for the other teams, then I have too much competition to fight for that only one prize that we have. So it's a complicated, let's say, pull.
Yeah. I mean, look at the Western European viewership, right? If you look at Dota, right? It's like us, Secret, Liquid,
Enigma has a lot of
Enigma,
viewership still.
yeah, Enigma, right? So it's like any match you play, like you play Gaiman or you play anybody else, and like you're gonna carry the viewership for those games. You're gonna carry all those teams. You kind of have to, right? Like by existing, you create the value for those teams.
This like the whole esports thing. I think it has to just be one big giant partnership amongst like all the teams, the game developers, like the players, all of it. I just think that Valve just is not interested in anything like that. So I just think,
Okay.
CS has a pretty decent thing going with the stickers, but like,
So,
I don't know.
Peter, I'm going to
Writing
give
is
you
on the
something
wall, I
else.
think.
Correct. And I'm going to give you something else. I don't think that. This is going to be more complicated to explain to people. But let's say you have leverage. Leverage means power over someone else. Why would the developer of the game want to have someone who is very powerful and can be very vocal against them? I don't think they care. They want that. So they want esports to be a marketing tool for them to advertise the game. And they want esports to be a retention way for people to stay in the game. But by how it's designed, you will have players and companies and voices that will become very strong. And when they become very strong brands, they can speak against you and they can rile the community against you. I don't think that the developers want that. So if you give them any kind of alternative or place that they can go to create similar results, even if artificial, they're going to go that way.
Yeah, that's a good point.
My opinion, from what I can see, you know?
And it begs the
Which is,
question of like, does
Mhm.
esports need like, so when you design a game, right? Like either the game is good enough to stand on its own, you don't need esports, or you designed it intentionally to have esports, or the community will build it to have esports. I guess in those three veins. If you look at Blizzard, right, like look at the titles they have. World of Warcraft, like millions of people play and buy the game, and they've tried to develop an esports scene on the back of it, but it's been relatively flat. Like the biggest thing out of World of Warcraft is Race to World First, right, which is an awesome event. But people have been have been critical of that game for God knows how long. The developer doesn't really do anything about it, right? So giving millions of people a platform for one of the biggest titles in the world doesn't really change much. On the other side, you have games that are designed specifically for esports. Even if like those players get a platform to do it, um, the developers still in Overwatch League, for example, is probably the other side of that coin. even with that platform, yeah, it's been shit on, but it hasn't really changed much as well, right? So I think for what you're getting at in both of these games is just that it's the product itself has to still be good, and it's like the community pressure hasn't really done too much, I think, in a lot of these titles to actually make it better. Even if you're giving these people platforms and powerful voices, like I haven't seen much of a shift because these companies are just too big now.
So, Peter, let me ask you something directly to you. At one point, you were a very, very strong voice inside of Dota, and you were very vocal. Do you think that people liked how vocal you were? They were actually, no, I'd rather you not talk.
And when you say people, do you mean like Valve, or do you just mean like the community?
In general, the community, advertisers, other owners, Valve.
I think I'm a pretty ambitious guy, a little bit of an entrepreneur spirit. So I think I was always kind of seen as like a little bit of like a con man in Dota. Like, oh, like what's Peter's next big business idea for how we're gonna change esports? I tried that a couple times in my career, and some ideas were dumber than others, but I'd always be trying something. I had a lot of positive interactions with Valve, I think, over the years. And I think that they were open to a lot of feedback. I think that if we as players were like a little bit more organized on our side, we could have done a better job of presenting our critiques. And I think that because a lot of this comes from not the players, I think, at least in the beginning, um, I don't think that Valve was like as willing to come to the table. So
Understand.
big picture, do I think that Valve was ever going to like change things and allow things to be different than they are? Maybe not, but I do think that there were steps that could have been taken if everybody was like a little bit more invested in Team Dota rather than Team whatever they were on that year.
Esports economics. I'm gonna make it very, very simple, very, very fast. You spend money to put a roster together and pay them salaries, whatever it costs, boot camps and all that. And then you need specific money to run the organization because you need to do social media, you need to do partnership, you need to do operations, you need to do content, you need to do that. Okay? And then how do you make money back? The biggest amount of money that people make is in sponsorship deals. Meaning I have Red Bull gives me money, and in exchange, Red Bull has their own specific objectives inside of this field. I have to provide value for them. 3 or 4 years ago, most of the sponsorship deals were I just want to be seen. So it was an awareness campaign. You just have to put me next to you. But these teams and these companies have become much more specific about what they want. And now it's becoming a performance model where we have to drive specifically value for them where they see the return in investment, ROI. Meaning, if I want to give OG $100,000, I need to create at least back 100,000 of value, tangible. It has become extremely complicated to actually fulfill those deals.
Yeah, I was going to add, like, I think you mentioned like the whole idea was just getting that awareness. That's kind of what's going on with like Nouns now. Like that's like the greater NFT project, and then they're basically funding Nouns Esports to just be like a marketing arm to not necessarily like help them sell NFTs, but just to increase brand awareness. So that way, like, it's the Noggles, right? Have you seen the funny glasses?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about? Like that's all they care about is just like that's like their Nike swoosh, and they just want that to show up in cool spots.
So
And
awareness. You need to put it
yeah,
in cool
exactly.
places
Like,
and associate yourself with cool things.
but that's what's funding us. It's not like
Yep.
we're not responsible as a business to kind of like turn revenue around as an esports team specifically, right? Like you have to kind of be attached to like something larger where you really are just the marketing department.
Correct. So now let's talk about what I said. Most of the money comes from sponsorships, but sponsorship dollars are going somewhere else. Why should you sponsor a team when you can sponsor the league or you can sponsor the streamers? But let's say that we still have money for here. Now, if you are a sponsor, you know for a fact that either you are all the way on the top of your game, or you don't really provide a lot of value, which means that we call it oxygen. there is not a lot of oxygen outside of the top. So teams that will run operations in Dota, let's say for $500,000, are going to find it very, very hard to find sponsors unless they're creating value for the brand. And in order to create value for the brands, you have to be really good, you have to have a big fan base, and you have to be very, very on the top, which is very hard by design. Which means that you normally need money to first build that competitive team and be very good before you achieve success, before you make enough interest to get brands that are making money. So the money that you fundraise is an acceleration, but sometimes it's just battle. Okay. Another way we make money is with in-game revenue or in-game things. And in this very broad thing, I can put from stickers to compendium to battle pass to revenue shares from sponsors in closed leagues. And I would even put prize pool. Like all this is money that you make by playing the game. But this money, like I presented in the beginning, has right now like 90% of them is out. Okay, so now what is the next venue of making money? Oh, we'll sell t-shirts and we'll sell hoodies. Okay, but the hoodie business has very low margins. It means that for every hoodie or every t-shirt that I make, even though I sell it for $50, I only keep $3 or $4. So how many hoodies do I have to sell to be able to afford a Dota 2 team? The answer is too many. There is never an audience that can buy as many hoodies to sustain the Dota team. So we have to figure out alternative ways of making money. Because right now, simply with the ecosystem that we have, there is not enough money to run the team or the org, which is why nobody's doing content, which is why people are getting cheaper, which is why we see people cutting down. Because this is a very simple formula. You either cut down your cost so you can afford it with the sponsorship deals that you have, or you invest on top, hoping that the revenues will follow you. And everybody has been investing for the last 5 years, and the revenues are not following. Only in very few teams. So now everybody's looking at each other saying, then what the fuck do we do?
Again, some stuff we can't talk about currently. Stuff like this, just things that feel like there's a lack of care to Dota lately. It feels like there has been a shift. I think there's no fucking question about that. There's been some sort of a shift. And then even things that I know that there's be careful again. There's news coming out after TI from, let's just say, a third party, not directly related to Valve at all, but once it's announced, it's going to make some waves as well. The pitchforks will be out most likely. It's just like domino after domino after domino. Like,
we know that after TI, there's going to be a few fucking news that the community is going to be outraged about. I don't know if you've seen it, Peter. Have you seen it?
I've heard rumors of the drama.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a few things that we can talk already about. Number one is Beyond the Summits did not get a DPC. Extremely dramatic.
Yep.
Okay. These guys have devoted their business and them personally to this game. And yes, like LD said on his post, it's not about not getting in when somebody else's competition is doing good. But it's just that they have to face and fight against people that are just funneling money to put them out of business. Because they don't have to make profit. Well, BTS has to make profit or have to stop becoming BTS. That's the fragility.
We see the gray label organizations like really struggling to turn a profit on esports. If you're not, directly connected to the game dev in some way, right? Like through like a white label production. That's like a lot of what we do at Esports Engine. Like our clients are the game devs. So it's like we have direct access to the cash sprout, right? And their money is coming into us. So like that makes us a viable business long term. Whereas if you're not a part of that game developers ecosystem in like a major way, it's really hard to justify like long-term investment.
Correct. Which is why we play, or which is why some of these companies are wondering, why should we invest in Dota? Look at Blast. They did Bounty Hunter, and then they were like, well, why would I, Blast, invest my money that I raised from my investors to grow Dota? No, either you make it financially viable for me, or why would I invest money on you? It's not my job to grow your game, You do it, buddy. So, in my opinion, BTS invested their own money in making the community what it is right now.
For sure.
And now is, well, should Valve be indebted with them forever? Well, no. I don't have an answer for that. But right now, they now don't get a DPC. And that's it. They're out. GG. High five. Holy shit.
And I think it's safe to say that like Beyond the Summit like didn't lose it because they weren't doing a good job, right? Like they really do like provide like the best casters. They have great content pieces. Like they go above and beyond for Dota in comparison to like what, not like comparing to other. I think everyone, not all production companies are the same, but I think generally like we've had pretty good experiences in Dota, at least for like the English streams. Debatable on some of like the remote broadcast stuff that's more common nowadays, but Beyond the Summit was always, I mean, at least the events that I went to was always really great. So I'm sure it just came down to like a matter of cost, and Beyond the Summit probably just became too expensive, I think is my suspicion, and Valve just decided to make a financial decision to help them make more money.
But let's explain this for a second. They became too expensive because they have to turn a profit or at least cover cost. If there is a company who has so much money in that it doesn't have to turn a profit, it can actually outbid you in the process. Okay? If I have a bottle of water and I don't want to make money, I just want to sell you my bottle of water, and Peter has a bottle of water, he has to feed his family, and we say $1, and I say I give you for free, I just blow up the market. Because you cannot compete against me. But I am okay losing $1 for this because I have $100 million, in my bank account. So all I have to do is put you out of business.
Yeah, it's a very monopolistic trend for everything, right? It's like there's only going to be a few TOs, a few people that, or not a few TOs. I mean, there are only a few, right? If you think about it, a few publishers and a few people in between. Like that's all the ecosystem can fit in right now, and you'll have the minimum number of teams that it can to support it, and that'll be esports. And at some point, people will just realize like you can't grow it anymore. Like it's marginal, not exponential. And then what do you do then? Like shift to something new? Who knows? I mean, it's a very pessimistic view of it, but it's all working toward like all of this the economies work towards being a monopoly effectively, right? So
Beyond the Summit has no, in a way, 5-year contracts or 10-year contracts. They cannot really develop an investment on this. And in a way, it's very hard to say, okay, if you do these 10 things, you get this deal forever. If you do these 10 things, how do you quantify success? All we know is that they were doing X and that now they're not going to do it. Whatever reasons, it's not for me to say because I don't know. I don't know if they were producing this or I don't know if they were this. I don't even know who's going to get to do DPCs in North America. But it becomes, once again, what I wanted to go back is the leverage. Does the developer want anyone to have leverage on top of them, to have power on them? And the moment that you on purpose rotate TOs, and the moment that you do those things, in a way, you're constantly keeping the power on you because nobody has enough time to build any power. So I think that's exactly what's happening right now. That's my read of the situation right now. Developers have decided that they don't want anyone to have power over them. Why would they?
Yeah, it's not worth it. It's not worth the headache, right? Like,
so all right, I'll counterpoint that one. Riot for the first, God, I don't know how many years runs the LCS, runs all the production, right? But recently for Valorant specifically, they've now outsourced a lot of their productions in each region, right? They've used Freaks for You, they use who was it? Nerd Street in the US. So there's a lot of other companies now that they're outsourcing it. So why would you shift for a model? I mean,
I can tell you that it's actually very simple.
Yeah.
All these other companies want to get in business with Riot. All of them are operating as a loss. All of them. Meaning all of them are willing to lose money to get in bed with Riot. Correct. Which means that Riot is thinking, okay, if I do it myself, it's going to cost me $20 million. But if I associate myself with these other teams, it's going to cost me 15. Fuck it.
Right.
And they
And then
actually
it
even
forces
release
all them.
liability. They don't even need to actually be guilty of anything that happens, No,
Right.
you guys deal with it.
Right. So now when you get to that point, now all the TOs or the providers start fighting each other, right? Like Nerd Street will fight Esports Arena, will fight Esports Engine, right? In theory, would fight all of you guys. And then whoever comes out the cheapest, right? Which means you guys have to undercut each other to get in bed with Riot in theory.
There you go.
Right. Now the interesting thing is like that now detracts from all the quality of the product that you're giving and people don't like it. So it's always this weird cycle of, okay, well, we're not getting more revenue, or we're trying to squeeze the revenue and we're trying to cut the cost. So we're trying to split on both ends of it. And that's what I think is destroying a lot of the ecosystem at an accelerated rate, is like we're trying to see the graph go, we're trying to see revenues go up and costs go down at the same time. And it's like, yeah, good luck with that one. Like when
That's
you
how
can
we
run a
had
business like that.
Last Chance Qualifier.
Yeah.
Is this right here. Last Chance Qualifier was an incredible product with incredible games that was done very, very cheaply to run costs down while they were trying to drive revenues up. So they signed a betting deal and they cut costs when everybody was remote. That's it. This is it.
Mm-hmm.
This is it. This is exactly the perfect manifestation of this. And the key thing is, this is not happening right now. I don't want to throw any more names because obviously I need to have at least 3 friends by the time I finish this podcast. But companies have been undercutting each other for a very, very, very long time. And inside esports, there is companies that had raised so much money that they could operate businesses at loss. On teams, on TOs, on everywhere. And there are teams whose business is making everything so expensive for everybody that nobody can do anything. But that's the business model because they have so much money that they're not okay. They don't need to have low salaries, low thing. They can hide behind saying we just want to be competitively better. But that's not what you're doing. You're putting so much money in, so everything gets so expensive, then the little guys cannot afford it anymore. I think there is like Bond the River. Is that the term in poker?
Esports Engine is a very large company. We're like 250 plus people at this point, and yeah, it's pretty crazy. We're growing a lot, I think. So,
do you think that is because you successfully have locked the developers? Is that the key of the success, or what do you think is the key of your success?
I think tons of developer relationships, and then it's all just like spreads through word of mouth. Like we don't really do much outbound. It's all just like game devs bringing RFPs to us and wanting us to do it, because I think we are like generally expensive, but I think the product is what they're looking for in terms of quality.
And I can understand why. The community job that you guys did was amazing.
Yeah, there's way less risks on their side of like associating with all these esports teams, and we're talking about Carlos, right? Like just being, I mean, Riot and them aren't completely white label because they do have these partnerships with teams, but it makes sense why they're very like politically correct and not really having any tolerance for anything that might be controversial. So definitely gonna have like you called it like sanitization, right? So
Mr. Beast has a better chance of getting a spot for League of Legends than anybody else now. Like all these people do so much stuff. Like Riot understands, like the people that got you from A to B, from League of Legends, the LCS to franchising, are not the people to get you from growing Valorant to a global game. And those people eventually down the road, if you're looking at it in 5 years, if when we go through the first iteration of partners, those people might not be the same ones who you put into the new Riot fighting game or the new Riot MMO or whatever it is. It's just going to keep growing, and the people that are the most amenable to work with for keeping them in check, and you can have a little bit of a fight with them because you can't just be wholly like, yes, you're the best thing ever, but it's on their, you can be collaborative, but it's on their terms, right? So
Okay, so I will finish with this thought. What is the good thing you have to say? Because you have to end up with a good thing,
I think that you guys are sounding the alarms, right? I think you guys are woke to, hey, the system's a little messed up, and I think we're, the uprising is coming. It's the shakeup, right? The economy's crashing. It's going to be massive consolidations across esports. Only the big will survive, and then the small will have to grow into something else. I'm optimistic
There's
about the
something
future.
positive there.
I'm optimistic, man. We're making progress, right? I think
Okay.
we can all agree esports like kind of sucks, or at least it kind of sucked the last 10 years. Like we built this for 10 years and the end product was not good. So like, do we want to do it again? Maybe. Right?
Yeah.
Money will come back in one day. The investment will return, but not tomorrow.
Hopefully, a bit more scrutinized. I think.
Mike,
I
what
think
is your
with
happy thought?
my happy thought, I don't have happy thoughts, man. I'm the.
Try one.
I'll give
Try
you.
one.
I'll give you. No, no. I'll give you my. My Zen. I'll give you my Zen quote, dude. It's like the. The esports is changing and it's not good nor bad. It just is. Um, but realistically, I do think like Peter said, like its change is coming, and I think we've been doing things a certain way. I think we've been following a certain model for so long. And it's shown results, but I think that's a byproduct of the overall ecosystem where like money has just been flying around, and it's been readily available for anybody. It's been it's been very bullish. A lot of risk taking has gone on, and I think people are a bit more cognizant now of how to build something stable, or how to build something in a more responsible way. And I think that's a positive change for the overall ecosystem. Is let's get people who are actually focused and like maybe like on my side, right, what I would deal with daily is like maybe the player salary is kind of normalized to what the revenues are, right? Maybe the advertisements change, maybe the sponsors and the engagement, the expectations, they start shifting into more, I would say, realistic and incremental growth instead of exponential returns. I think if the ecosystem can start focusing on those things, as a result of kind of this correction and consolidation, I think it'll be in a much healthier place. Because I don't think esports is going anywhere. I don't think it's going to die out. I think it'll continue to evolve, but I think the evolution has to be one towards more responsible, more responsible ecosystem. And I do hope, right now it's a very competitive environment. I do hope that a lot more people work towards a collaborative effort, because I think that's one of the biggest things that have been missing across most ecosystems is just that it's been, you know, everyone's fighting, racing to the bottom. Like, let's not do that. Let's bring each other up in this field. And I think that's what we're seeing. Like, sure, a lot of consolidations and M&A is driven out of almost necessity because like you need to survive. But I'm hoping that survival mechanism ends up becoming an actual, hey, you and I can work together. We can build this thing and it's really cool. We can put our resources, our expertise together and grow. And it's more of a, you know, I would say a benevolent process as opposed to you know, a malicious one. But I would say that's the hope, is that, the Phoenix from the ashes type of model.
So
Feels
I will
pretty
leave you with
happy.
my
Feels
happy
pretty
thought.
happy.
My happy thought is that as much as sometimes the developers want to feel that they have all the power is in the community. Full stop.
Preach, brother.
Full stop. So if we can either inspire, educate, or get the community together, the world changes. They move mountains because the game will have to adapt to what the community wants. But we need to figure out how to get players organized, teams organized, and community organized so we can all together work to create the world that we want. While we are all divided, we are all at the mercy of the developer. So I love Dota because Dota is the game that has made, in a way, my esports career, that I made my friends in. I have a group of loyal friends, and the community has been the best part of Dota. But the Dota community right now seems to be very salty, very toxic, and very antagonistic. So we need to figure out how to really listen to what the community wants, but the community also has a responsibility to help create the change that they wish in the world. Maybe they should be funding money or funding things outside of the battle pass if that's what they want. If they want to crowdfund events, let's create the crowdfund ability to do things outside. And that is my positive thought. If you're listening to the podcast right now, you have to decide or think, what do I want Dota to be? And then you have to decide and research what are the steps that you can take to be part of that change. Because you have a lot of power, because advertisers come where you go and see. The world changes when you go and see. Because at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is get users, get views, get attention, and get all this time. So instead of just being like a headless chicken, just in a way being at everybody's mercies and then complaining the whole time, Just take a second and figure out who are the people that you like that are doing what you want, and how do I help them create this. Sometimes help is just support. Sometimes it's just watching their videos, putting comments, putting likes on this, Support a variety of people. Because not only, you don't want only OG to survive. You want OG to survive, you want Secret to survive, you want the We Say Things to survive, you want VDS to survive, we want all of us to survive together. And then we as teams, we have to create monetization tools for you to provide the support where you want it. But also we have the responsibility then, we have to create authentic value for you against that money. And I think that that's my positive thought. My positive thought is that until there's no fans in Dota, Dota is still here. It's still here. It just feels that very, very dark and very, very pessimistic because maybe the appetite for the battle pass is not there. So then there is compounding shit together. The appetite for a bad battle pass is not there. The optimism of the optics of the community on Dota is that this is dying because it is. And then we're all in a way compounding on that. Okay, stop the whining, which I have whined for 2 hours today, and then figure out how we can do something new together with smart people and passionate people. And let's go back to the beginning. Community-driven events. For me is, I need to figure out how to do another community event. I need to figure out how we do a BTS event because that's what I watch when I got into Dota. I became an EG fan watching you, Peter, at a BTS event. So I know that there's a lot of people that are going to enter into Dota if they have those events. Because those events were personality, fun, hanging out with your friends, and Dota. So yeah, that's my thought.